The big question today is the ceasefire actually over? Because there's been breaking news overnight, and we're going to get into all of it, and we're going to look at the broader picture of what took place. The United States has been carrying out strikes, and we're going to understand exactly why and what they're doing there. Let's take a look at this Fox News clip
that we are following for you. This being reported by Reuters' very own Phil Stewart, putting this out on X, saying U.S. forces carry out strikes in southern Iran in self-defense. U.S. Central Command says U.S. strikes targeted missile launch sites in Iranian boats seeking to lay mines. U.S. Central Command says U.S. military will defend U.S. forces while using restraint during the ongoing ceasefire, Central Command says. So activity is brewing right now in the Middle East here, and this all comes as negotiations seemed like they were going in a positive direction. Over the weekend, we heard multiple times from President Trump via Truth Social saying that negotiations were in a good favor. And again, it seemed like it was getting close to the finish line. Now, earlier, President Trump put this out on Truth Social saying the enriched uranium, nuclear dust, will either be immediately turned over to the United States to be brought home and destroyed, or preferably in conjunction and coordination with the Islamic Republic of Iran, destroyed in place or at another acceptable location with the Atomic Energy Commission or its equivalent being witness to this event. Thank you for your attention to this matter, President DJT. So we take you now back out live right now to the White House as we're learning that new report from Reuters that there has been now strikes happening in southern Iran. We're also learning this from Fox News' very own Jennifer Griffin saying putting this out, saying CENTCOM spokesperson Captain Tim Hawkins to Fox says U.S. forces conducted self-defense strikes in southern Iran today to protect our troops from threats posed by Iranian forces. Targets included missile launch sites and Iranian boats attempting to emplace mines. U.S. Central Command continues to defend our forces while using restraint during the ongoing ceasefire. So now Reuters and Fox News continuing to report on this breaking news of strikes now in southern Iran from the U.S. forces, feeling that they needed to do so in self-defense. This is all happening as negotiations are trying to get to that finish line. We'll continue to follow the very latest here for you on Live Now from Fox. But on this Memorial Day, learning that there is now some big activity going on in southern Iran from U.S. forces right now. We'll keep.
Okay. So we have that. We have these strikes in southern Iran. And so what did we learn from this report? What are we told? We're told that they were in self-defense and that they were targeting Iranian boats that were seeking to emplace, which means to install for operational use, to install mines, more mines in the Strait of Hormuz, and that they were attacking missile launch sites in southern Iran. Okay, and they say that it's in self-defense. Now, let's get some more details. Where exactly were these strikes in southern Iran? Because they really tell the story about what's actually happening here. So this is from the national news. This is a United Arab Emirates outlet giving their reporting. U.S. strikes Iranian missile sites as mediators press ahead with talks. The U.S. military said it launched overnight strikes on Iranian missile sites and boats laying mines as the mediators press ahead. And I'm going to jump down to where it says what happened here. U.S. Central Command said that they were self-defense strikes. Very nice. The targets were missile launch sites and vessels that were attempting to lay sea mines. Okay, where were they? Here we go. Iranian media reported explosions in coastal areas, including Sirik and Jask, close to the Strait of Hormuz. The Tasnim news agency said 3 blasts were heard in the southern city of Bandar Abbas, while other outlets reported the situation was under control and port operations and civilian activity were unaffected. And then, of course, the Iranians claimed that they failed. And then it gets into the fact that Prime Minister Netanyahu is called to ramp up activity in Lebanon. We will get into that in a few minutes, a little bit later in this video, because it's all connected. The U.S. strikes on Iran came hours after reports that Washington and Tehran were nearing a de-escalation agreement, raising questions about the effects of the military action on the fragile ceasefire and negotiations. Current talks have focused on technical language and verification mechanisms, as both countries continue to exchange warnings over military action. And then it talks about the stockpile of uranium. Very nice. Now, before we get into the exact locations of all of this, I just want to share a couple more stories. And these next two stories are both from Turkish government media, from the Anadolu Ajansi media. Okay, so it says here, Iran says, this is also from today. Okay, so first of all, we have the strikes in southern Lebanon. We now have locations, which are Bandar Abbas, Sirik, and Jask. And then we have Iran saying it downed a U.S. drone and forced other aircraft to retreat from airspace. Now, this is just Iran claiming this. We don't have independent corroboration, but look, what does it say here? Iran's IRGC, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, said Tuesday, that's today, that it shot down a U.S. MQ-9 drone and claimed that an RQ-4 drone and an F-35 jet also entered Iranian airspace before retreating. The aircraft entered Iranian airspace over the Gulf region. The force also said it reserves the right to respond to any ceasefire violation by the U.S. And now look what it says. Earlier Tuesday, that's today, Iran's semi-official Fars news agency reported that U.S. and Israeli aircraft struck Iranian vessels south of Larak Island near the Strait of Hormuz, killing several Iranian nationals. The claims could not be independently verified. Okay, so now we have another location, Larak Island. Okay, and now we have one more. Is U.S.-Israeli aircraft strike Iranian boats near Strait of Hormuz? This also mentions Larak, south of Larak Island in the Strait of Hormuz. Okay, now, what are we talking about here? So here is the Strait of Hormuz. Okay, let's back it up a little bit. This is the Strait of Hormuz. Okay, all these red dots here are all ports. Okay, this is the United Arab Emirates, and these are their major ports and the smaller ports. Okay, these are all the ports in the Strait of Hormuz. Now, at the tip here, this is part of Oman, but these are all the ports in the Strait of Hormuz. Now, let's take a look at what are the places that were struck. So we were told Bandar Abbas, that's right here. We were also told about Sirik. Sirik is right here. See, this is the tip. Let's back it up a little bit. Sirik is right here. Here's Sirik. And Jask is down here. Jask is actually like on the outside of the strait. Like if you're at Jask, you're already outside the Strait of Hormuz. Jask, right there. Jask. Okay, Jask. And then we have, Sirik, Bandar Abbas. And how about that island, Larak Island? That's right here. Okay, so let's pull it back now and take a look at the map again. Larak Island, Bandar Abbas, Sirik, Jask. Those are the sites that were hit. And what were we told was hit? We were told they were first of all striking boats in the area that were laying mines, but also these are the on-land locations that they hit, that they were striking missile launch sites. Missile launch sites, Larak Island, or the area of Larak Island. That's where the mines probably would have been laid. And the missile launch sites. Now, why are the missile launch sites there? Why am I showing you all the ports? And why is Jask part of it? It's outside the Strait of Hormuz. Well, I told you a number of weeks ago that the UAE, which its main ports for the export of oil generally are the ports along here. Okay, Khalid and Jebel Ali. These are the major ports that they use. Okay, but ever since the war and all the trouble in the Strait of Hormuz, they started rerouting much of their oil through a pipeline that they built that goes out to the coast here, these two ports here, to Fujairah. Fujairah is right here, and Corfacan. These two ports have ramped up their usage for the UAE to get their oil out of the Persian Gulf, out of the, to bypass the Strait of Hormuz. Now, the Iranians, throughout this whole ceasefire, their big threat, the reason that they have the Straits of Hormuz closed, let's back up. Why are the Straits of Hormuz closed? The Iranians don't have a navy. So why are the straits closed? First of all, they've laid a bunch of mines. They've laid mines, and we learn from this news item that they've been trying to lay more mines. But they've also threatened to fire missiles at the oil facilities and the oil shipping facilities across the Strait of Hormuz. Okay, now that is very hard to defend against. That's the problem. The reason the Strait of Hormuz is closed is they also threaten to fire at boats, at ships passing through. The missile launch sites are very hard to track. A lot of them are built into the mountainside. They're built into the coastline. There's all these missile launch sites that the Iranians set up that kind of booby trap the area so that they could disrupt the Strait of Hormuz. And that's very hard to completely eliminate. Even if you destroy their navy and destroy their air force, all it takes is, a small missile launch site right across the strait. So what's the U.S. doing? The U.S. identified these missile launch sites that are directly across from these assets here. The Corfacan port and the Fujairah port, which were the UAE's way of bypassing the problem of the Iranians closing the Strait of Hormuz, while the Iranians had a way to fight that, right? Because they have the Jask port. They have Bandar el-Jask, which is right across from Corfacan port. And then the Iranians have probably missile launch sites in Erick, which is right across the Qumzar and Kasab ports, which are two major shipping hubs for Oman, right at the tip of the Strait of Hormuz there. Those are not generally used for oil. They're more used for commercial goods, but they're right there. But you notice where the sites are. Look at the sites America targeted yesterday. Jask is right across from these two ports. Erick is right across from these ports. And then you have Larak Island, which is this little island right here, which is also, and it said just south of Larak Island is where they were targeting, where they were carrying out strikes. Probably that's where the mines were being laid. And you have Bandar Abbas right here. What do I think is happening? So Marco Rubio keeps saying in every statement, one way or another, the Strait of Hormuz is going to get opened. So as the Iranians are driving a hard bargain, and we talked about this in the videos I made the last couple of days, and I've been very down on the deal. I'm still down on the deal. The deal as it's been presented to us in the media is terrible. But the Iranians, thankfully, God bless them, have also been driving a really hard bargain and ramping up their threats. And here you see that they're trying to lay mines. They're digging in on their positions. They're trying, they're playing hard to get. Well, I think that these strikes yesterday were really about the Americans saying, listen, we're going to keep negotiating with you or waiting for you to agree to capitulate, but we're not going to wait around for you to open up the Straits of Hormuz. And these strikes yesterday, they were called self-defense to protect America's troops. That's the way you saw the Fox News item there and the official statement from CENTCOM. They called them self-defense. But what they're really about is opening the Strait of Hormuz, because if the United States could take out the missile launch sites in these areas here that face the ports of Oman and the UAE on the Strait of Hormuz, and they could deal with the mine situation in this critical spot here, south of Larak Island, which is the narrowest spot in the Strait of Hormuz, then they could really, this is the process of opening the Strait of Hormuz. If we wonder to ourselves, how can America open the Strait of Hormuz? And sometimes people will say, like, why can't America's so powerful? Why can't America just open the Strait of Hormuz? It's not a door that you push open. Opening the Strait of Hormuz means that you deal with all the missile threats and the mine threats. And that's what these attacks yesterday are. When you look at the locations of the attacks, it's pretty clear what they were attacking. Now, at the same time, we have this item that also broke overnight, which is Prime Minister Netanyahu ordering the IDF to intensify blows against Hezbollah amid surge in drone attacks. Israel will escalate strikes against Hezbollah in Lebanon, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said on Monday evening, last night, as a U.S. official said the terror group had ignored warnings to halt firing at Israel in a conflict that could threaten U.S.-Iran negotiations. The Prime Minister's remarks were followed by confirmation from the IDF that it had launched a fresh wave of strikes against Hezbollah targets in eastern and southern Lebanon. Lebanese security sources said people started fleeing. Okay. Schools were shut. A senior U.S. official indicated on Monday, amid a surge in drone attacks targeting Israel, that Washington could soon greenlight a larger Israeli operation against Hezbollah in Lebanon. Hello? And then a few hours later, the United States starts carrying out strikes in the Strait of Hormuz against these strategic locations that I just showed you on the map. And Israel makes an announcement that they're going to intensify their strikes. And Israel then puts this out late last night that they've struck 70 plus Hezbollah infrastructure sites using around 85 munitions in several areas across Lebanon, 10 command centers, weapon storage facilities, additional infrastructure sites used by Hezbollah. Additionally, Hezbollah terrorists operating on motorcycles were eliminated. It was Israel is putting out there that they're ramping up the offensive against Hezbollah. They're ramping it up. This is all connected. As you see here, a senior U.S. official indicated that Washington could greenlight soon larger Israeli operations against Hezbollah in Lebanon. And this has a lot to do with, it talks about these drone attacks. The drone situation has been a very problematic situation for Israel because over the past 8 days, as it says here, Hezbollah has fired over 1,000 drones and more than 700 rockets at Israel. This is not really widely reported. Everyone thinks that there's kind of a low flame up there and that we're not really at war so much in Lebanon and it's kind of sort of ceasefire-ish. Not true. Not true. It's been pretty intense. And I know this not only from media, but also talking to personnel who are up there. It is pretty intense fighting up there. Look at that. Over the past 8 days, Hezbollah has fired over 1,000 drones and more than 700 rockets in Israel in an apparent bid to derail talks between Jerusalem and Beirut. Right? And the drone threat, Hezbollah in recent weeks has been steadily increasing the number of drone, UAV, and rocket attacks on Israeli troops deployed in southern Lebanon and on northern Israel communities, undeterred by the U.S. brokered ceasefire. And what they're doing with these drones, look at this. In a rare public acknowledgement, the IDF official told Channel 12 on Monday that Israel has found itself defenseless against the drone threat posed by Hezbollah, with the terror group increasingly deploying first-person view drones guided by fiber optic cables, which are largely immune to electronic jamming. They're actually very low-tech drones. They're very inexpensive drones. They explode. They're the drones that come in and then they explode. And they've been killing soldiers. They've been and they've been attacking civilians with them. And it's a very big problem. So what they do is the drone is attached to a thin fiber optic cable and it doesn't fly wireless. It flies through the fiber optic cable. And that's why you can't jam it because it's not based on a wireless connection. And that makes them very difficult. So the official said Israel is using makeshift methods to defend against the surge in drone use. They're coming up with all sorts of attempts like nets, and soldiers are just firing their machine guns at them, hoping to knock them down. And then he goes on to say, the truth is our hands are tied and it needs to change soon. Okay. And of course the BBC, when they report it, Netanyahu says Israel will intensify strikes against Hezbollah. And it talks about it that Hezbollah is firing drones to retaliate against Israel, which is also absurd. The only reason we have any hostilities with Hezbollah is because they started attacking us. First, after October 7th, we did not attack them. They started attacking us. And then they were quiet, but then after the Iran war started, they started attacking us again. So Hezbollah continues to attack us, and that's why we go in there and we're trying to clean it out. So how do we interpret Israel's behavior here? First of all, we have that statement from the American official about greenlighting. We also know that the Israelis have not been happy about the possibility of this deal with Iran, as it's been reported. And with the potential that the deal could be happening, it makes sense for Israel to ramp up the attacks now with the dual objective, a sort of a hedge, like if there is going to be a deal, let's get in as much damage to Hezbollah as we can before the deal goes through and America ties her hands, if that happens. Alternatively, Iran has been insistent that part of the negotiation for a ceasefire deal, for an end of the war deal, is that the war in Lebanon also has to end, which means that they want to see the hostilities in Lebanon end, and Israel knows that. And by ramping up the attacks in Lebanon, they could actually scuttle the possibility of there being a ceasefire deal, which would be in Israel's best interest. So there's a few reasons why Israel might be doing that. But again, like I said, it seems that the United States also gave a green light. Also, the fact that the United States is carrying out strikes last night against these sites in southern Lebanon, in southern Iran, in the Strait of Hormuz, in Bandar Abbas, and Sirik, and Jask, and Larak. The fact that the United States is carrying out these strikes here also gives cover for Israel to carry out its own strikes against Hezbollah. If you put all of this together, here's what I think is happening. I think the chances of a deal are very, very slim. And Trump is taking the leverage back away from Iran. Right? I've been critical of Trump the last few days, but I think Trump is a smart guy and he's taking the leverage back. I think he sensed that the Iranians were digging in. They were taking advantage of the quiet and they were using it in their favor. And now Trump is saying, you know what? I'm not going to wait around for you guys to open the Strait of Hormuz. I'm going to start degrading the very specific capabilities you have that allow you to keep the Strait of Hormuz closed. And I'm going to degrade those capabilities so that the Iranians now start realizing that they may not even be able to keep the Strait of Hormuz closed. Because if all the rocket sites, if all the threats from Jask, Sirik, Bandar Abbas, Larak, if all the threats from there, this is the key area. If they take out all the threats there, then the United States could actually get the Strait of Hormuz open. So it'll be interesting to see if these strikes continue over the next few days, if we see more of this activity here, or if it was just a kind of shot across the bow, a warning shot to the Iranians. I think, again, let me sum up this video this way and bring it to a close. I believe that this wasn't about self-defense. That's the way it's being reported. I think this was about sending a message to the Iranians, hey, we can open the Strait of Hormuz ourselves. So if you guys don't start moving on submitting to our demands, we're just going to take matters into our own hands and it's going to be even worse for you. I think that that's what this is about. And meanwhile, Israel is doing the right thing in ramping up attacks against Hezbollah at the same time. Either way you slice it, it looks to me like this, what we were calling a ceasefire is not really a ceasefire at all. And that's a good thing. That's a good thing. So that's my take on the news. Hope you found this helpful. God bless.